Welcome back to Naravu Stories. Today's story takes us into the complicated, funny, and emotional life of two young parents trying to build a future together. We're diving into the full story recap of episodes 1 through 10 of Georgie and Mandy's first marriage. This series follows the lives of Georgie Cooper and Mandy McAllister as they navigate marriage, parenting, financial struggles, and family drama, all while trying to prove that their relationship can survive the chaos around them. If you remember Georgie from young Sheldon, you already know he's charming, confident, and sometimes a little reckless. But now he has bigger responsibilities, a wife, a baby, and a future to build. Let's start from the beginning. Episode 1, A New Beginning. The story begins shortly after Georgie and Mandy officially start their married life together. Georgie Cooper is determined to prove that he can be a responsible husband and father, but reality quickly hits him when he realizes that supporting a family is much harder than he expected. Mandy, who is older and more mature than Georgie, constantly worries about whether Georgie is ready for the responsibilities of marriage. Their baby daughter, Cece, becomes the center of their world. While Georgie tries to juggle work and fatherhood, Mandy struggles with adjusting to her new life as a mother. Things become even more complicated when Mandy's parents, Jim and Audrey McAllister, become heavily involved in their lives. Audrey especially doubts Georgie's ability to take care of her daughter. She constantly criticizes him, believing Mandy could have chosen someone more stable. Despite the tension, Georgie remains determined to prove everyone wrong. He wants to show that he can provide for his family no matter what. Episode 2, Financial Pressure. As the days pass, Georgie begins to feel the intense pressure of being the main provider. He works long hours at the tire shop, but the money still isn't enough to cover all their expenses. Bills begin piling up. Rent, baby supplies, food. Everything seems more expensive now that they have a child. Mandy starts considering going back to work, but Georgie insists that he can handle things on his own. He wants to be the kind of husband who supports his family completely. But secretly, Georgie is worried. The financial pressure begins creating tension between him and Mandy. They start arguing about money, responsibilities, and their future. Yet deep down, they both want the same thing: a stable life for their daughter. Episode 3, Family Interference. Mandy's parents continue to play a major role in their marriage. Jim McAllister, Mandy's father, is more supportive of Georgie. He sees potential in the young man and believes Georgie genuinely cares about Mandy and Cece. Audrey, however, remains skeptical. She constantly reminds Mandy that Georgie is younger and less experienced. Her comments slowly begin affecting Mandy's confidence in the marriage. Meanwhile, Georgie tries harder than ever to earn Audrey's respect. He offers to help Jim with small business projects and attempts to show that he's responsible. But Audrey still sees him as a teenager who got her daughter pregnant. This tension creates several awkward family dinners filled with passive-aggressive remarks and uncomfortable silences. Episode 4, Learning to be Parents. As new parents, Georgie and Mandy quickly realize they are still learning everything about raising a child. Sleepless nights become normal. Baby cries at unexpected hours. And simple tasks like feeding or calming Cece often become stressful challenges. One night, both Georgie and Mandy become completely exhausted while trying to put Cece to sleep. The moment turns into a mix of frustration and laughter. Despite all the chaos, they begin realizing something important. Parenthood may be difficult, but they're in it together. Their shared struggles slowly begin strengthening their relationship. Episode 5, Georgie's Big Idea. Feeling desperate to improve their financial situation, Georgie begins searching for new opportunities. He believes that if he can find the right business idea, he could earn enough money to give his family a better life. Georgie starts exploring different ways to expand his work at the tire shop. He even considers opening a small side business, selling used tires. At first, Mandy worries that Georgie might be taking on too much, but she also sees how determined he is to succeed. She begins supporting his ideas more openly. For Georgie, this encouragement means everything. Episode 6, Marriage Challenges. As time goes on, the reality of married life begins creating new challenges. Georgie and Mandy, start realizing that love alone doesn't solve every problem. They argue about responsibilities around the house. They disagree about parenting decisions. And sometimes they struggle to communicate properly. But each conflict also teaches them something important about compromise. Instead of walking away from their problems, they begin working through them together. Slowly, they start growing not just as individuals, but as partners. Episode 7, Mandy's Identity Crisis. While Georgie focuses on work, Mandy begins questioning her own identity. Before becoming a mother, she had her own goals and ambitions. Now most of her time is spent taking care of the baby. Although she loves Cece deeply, Mandy sometimes feels like she has lost a part of herself. She starts thinking about returning to work or pursuing personal interests again. Georgie initially misunderstands her concerns, thinking she's unhappy with her family life. But after a heartfelt conversation, he realizes Mandy simply wants balance. This moment brings them closer together. Episode 8, Unexpected Opportunities. Georgie's business ambitions finally start showing promise. Through connections at the tire shop, he begins making deals that bring in extra income. Jim McAllister even begins helping him understand some basic business strategies. For the first time, Georgie feels like people are starting to take him seriously. Even Audrey slowly begins noticing his efforts. Although she still doesn't fully trust him, she can see that Georgie is trying, and that effort begins changing her perspective. Episode 9, A Test of Trust. Just when things seem to be improving, Georgie faces a difficult situation. A risky business opportunity appears that could either solve their financial problems or make things worse. Georgie becomes tempted by the chance to earn quick money, but Mandy worries the risk is too dangerous. This creates another major conflict between them. Georgie wants to prove he can succeed. Mandy wants security for their family. Eventually, Georgie decides to prioritize stability over risky decisions. It's a moment that shows how much he has matured. Episode 10, A Stronger Family. By the 10th episode, Georgie and Mandy have already gone through numerous challenges together. Financial stress, family criticism, parenting struggles, personal doubts. But instead of breaking them apart, these experiences have made them stronger. They are beginning to understand each other better. Georgie is becoming more responsible. Mandy is learning to trust Georgie's growth. And both of them are realizing that marriage isn't about perfection. It's about commitment. The episode ends with a quiet family moment. Georgie holds baby Cece, while Mandy watches with a smile. For the first time, their future doesn't feel uncertain. It feels possible. The pressure of growing up too fast. One of the biggest themes across the first 10 episodes is how quickly Georgie and Mandy are forced to grow up. Neither of them expected life to move this fast. Only a short time ago, Georgie was just a teenager trying to figure out what he wanted from life. Suddenly, he finds himself responsible for a wife, a baby, and an entire household. At times, the pressure almost feels overwhelming. There are moments where Georgie sits quietly at night, staring at unpaid bills or thinking about the future. The confidence he usually shows in front of others sometimes disappears when he's alone. But what makes Georgie different is that he never runs away from his responsibilities. Instead of giving up, he works harder. He takes extra shifts. He searches for better opportunities. And he constantly tries to prove that he deserves the trust Mandy has placed in him. For Mandy, the pressure feels different but equally heavy. She spent years building her own independence and identity. Now she finds herself living a completely different life than she once imagined. Motherhood is rewarding, but it also isolates her from the world she once knew. Friends she used to see regularly now seem distant. Conversations revolve around diapers, feeding schedules, and sleep routines. Sometimes Mandy feels like her life has become smaller, but whenever she looks at Cece, she remembers why everything changed. And she realizes that even though her life took an unexpected path, it's still meaningful. Jim McAllister's growing respect. As the episodes progress, Mandy's father Jim slowly begins to develop a stronger respect for Georgie. At the beginning, Jim is cautious. He knows Georgie is young and inexperienced, and he worries about whether Georgie can truly provide stability for Mandy and Cece. However, Jim also pays close attention to Georgie's behavior. He notices that Georgie never complains about working long hours. He notices how Georgie always tries to help around the house whenever he visits. And most importantly, Jim sees how Georgie looks at his daughter and granddaughter. There is genuine love there. One particular moment becomes a turning point. During a difficult day at the tire shop, Georgie struggles with a complicated repair job. Instead of giving up, he spends hours figuring out the solution. Jim happens to witness this determination. Later, he tells Mandy something surprising. Your husband might not know everything yet, but he's got the right kind of stubborn. For Georgie, earning even a small amount of respect from Jim feels like a major victory. Audrey's constant doubts. While Jim slowly softens toward Georgie, Audrey McAllister continues to remain skeptical. She believes Mandy deserves someone older and more established. From Audrey's perspective, Georgie represents uncertainty. She constantly questions his decisions. When Georgie talks about business ideas, Audrey rolls her eyes. When Georgie talks about future plans, she warns Mandy not to depend on promises. Her criticism sometimes creates uncomfortable tension during family gatherings. However, Audrey's behavior isn't purely cruel. Deep down, she is simply protective of her daughter. She remembers Mandy's struggles and fears that Georgie might not be able to support her long term. What Audrey doesn't realize yet is that Georgie is already changing, and over time, his actions will begin challenging her assumptions. Mandy's search for balance. As the weeks pass, Mandy begins thinking seriously about what she wants for herself outside of motherhood. She loves taking care of Cece, but she also misses having goals and ambitions of her own. The idea of returning to work becomes increasingly appealing. At first, she worries about bringing this up with Georgie. She fears he might think she doesn't trust him as a provider. But when they finally talk about it honestly, Georgie surprises her. Instead of becoming defensive, he listens. He realizes that Mandy isn't trying to replace his role in the family. She simply wants to feel fulfilled in more areas of her life. This conversation becomes one of the most mature moments in their relationship. It shows how both of them are slowly learning how to communicate, like true partners. Small victories. Throughout these episodes, not every improvement in Georgie and Mandy's life comes from huge dramatic moments. Sometimes the most meaningful progress happens through small victories. For example, there's a day when Georgie manages to fix a complicated problem at the tire shop and earns extra money. Another time, Mandy successfully handles a stressful parenting situation on her own. These small achievements might not seem significant individually, but together they slowly build confidence. Each success reminds them that they are capable of handling the challenges life throws at them. The importance of support systems. One of the key messages in the story is that young couples rarely succeed completely on their own. Even though Georgie wants to prove his independence, he eventually realizes that accepting help is not a weakness. Jim's advice about business becomes valuable. Mandy's parents occasionally help with babysitting. Friends and family provide emotional support during difficult moments. At first, Georgie resists relying on others. He wants to prove he can do everything himself. But over time, he begins understanding something important. Building a family isn't just about independence. It's about community. Learning from mistakes. Another important theme throughout episodes 1 to 10 is learning from mistakes. Neither Georgie nor Mandy is perfect. They make decisions that don't always work out. Sometimes Georgie becomes overly confident about a new idea. Sometimes Mandy becomes frustrated and says things she later regrets. But what makes their relationship strong is their willingness to admit when they're wrong. After arguments, they eventually sit down and talk things through. These conversations are often emotional, but they also lead to deeper understanding. Instead of letting conflicts destroy their relationship, they use those experiences to grow. Georgie's changing reputation. At the beginning of the series, many people in their community still see Georgie as a reckless teenager. However, as time passes, that perception slowly begins to change. People start noticing how hard he works. They notice how dedicated he is to his family. Some of the older men at the tire shop begin treating him less like a kid and more like a colleague. Even neighbors begin recognizing him as a young father trying to build a future. For Georgie, this growing respect becomes extremely motivating. It pushes him to continue improving. Mandy and Georgie's emotional bond. While the series contains plenty of comedy and family drama, one of its strongest elements is the emotional connection between Georgie and Mandy. There are several quiet scenes where they simply sit together late at night after putting Cece to sleep. During these moments, they talk about their fears, dreams, and hopes for the future. Sometimes they laugh about the chaos of their daily lives. Other times they share worries about whether they're doing the right thing. These conversations strengthen their relationship. They remind each other that even though life is difficult, they're not facing it alone, looking toward the future. By the end of episode 10, Georgie and Mandy are still far from having everything figured out. They still face financial challenges. Family tensions haven't completely disappeared. Parenthood continues to bring new surprises every day. But something important has changed. They are no longer just reacting to problems. They are beginning to build a future intentionally. Georgie is becoming more thoughtful about his business decisions. Mandy is rediscovering her own personal goals. And together, they are learning how to support each other's ambitions. Their relationship feels stronger than it did at the beginning. Not because life has become easier, but because they've proven they can survive the difficult moments. Final reflection. The first 10 episodes of Georgie and Mandy's First Marriage show that building a family is rarely simple. Love alone isn't enough. It takes patience, communication, sacrifice, and a willingness to grow. Georgie and Mandy may have started their journey under unexpected circumstances, but their story shows that real commitment can overcome even the most challenging beginnings. And as their journey continues, one thing becomes clear. This marriage may be their first, but the lessons they are learning now will shape the rest of their lives. And that brings us to the end of this extended recap of episodes 1 through 10 of Georgie and Mandy's First Marriage. Their journey is full of laughter, struggles, and emotional growth, and it's only just beginning. As the series continues, Georgie and Mandy will face even bigger challenges, new opportunities, and important decisions that could change their future forever. But one thing remains certain. No matter how difficult life becomes, they are determined to face it together. If you enjoyed this full story breakdown, make sure to like the video and subscribe to Neravu Stories for more detailed series recaps and movie story explanations. And until the next story, thanks for watching. The first 10 episodes of Georgie and Mandy's First Marriage focus heavily on growth, responsibility, and the reality of young love turning into real partnership. Georgie's journey is about proving he can step up as a father and husband. Mandy's journey is about learning to trust that their relationship can work despite the odds. And together, they begin building a life that is far from perfect, but full of hope.